We're at the National Religious Broadcasters Convention in Nashville, Tennessee, and we've been invited in by Israel 365 and NRB to witness a pretty interesting news conference where they're going to be talking about passing a resolution to stop calling the areas of Judea, Samaria, the biblical heartland, the West Bank. Let's go check it out.
I'm Rabbi Pesach Wolicki, and with me is Joshua Reinstein, president of the Israel Allies Foundation and director of the Knesset Christian Allies Caucus, Troy Miller, president of the NRB, and Tal Heinrich, spokesman for the Prime Minister of Israel's office. We're here at the NRB convention in Nashville, Tennessee, with the announcement of a very important resolution. To introduce the resolution, I'll turn the floor over to Joshua Reinstein.
Thank you so much, Pesach, for that warm introduction. I want to thank Israel 365, Rabbi Tuli Weiss and the whole team for putting this event together. A special thanks to the president of the NRB, Troy Miller, who's graciously helped us to facilitate all this. And we really thank you for all that you've done for Israel and the Jewish people. And of course, we're honored to be here with the spokesperson from the Prime Minister's office. Tal, thank you for being with us. Today is a very important day. We have a historic resolution that I'd like to talk about. Of course, the obvious place to unveil the resolution is the NRB, the National Religious Broadcasting Convention. It is Christians, not countries, that stand with Israel today, and the Christians are bringing their governments with them. Without Christian support, there'd be no embassies in Jerusalem. Without Christian support, we wouldn't have anti-BDS legislation in 37 states across the United States and many more countries around the world. We wouldn't even have observer status at the African Union without Christian support. So today, faith-based diplomacy, when people take their biblical support and turn into real political action, it's the most important weapon that Israel has in its diplomatic arsenal. It's the reason we have so many diplomatic successes around the world. So we thank our Christian brothers and sisters who are here today with us, to all the people at the NRB that are with us, to talk about this important resolution. People need to understand that language matters. And the language in Israel has been taken over and being held hostage. Things that mean beautiful things have turned into terrible things. For example, when you talk about peace in Israel, it means giving up land. When you talk about a two-state solution, it doesn't mean creating a Jewish state and a Palestinian state. It just means creating a Palestinian state, which we know leads to more war and terror. And one of the most egregious examples of this is calling Judea and Samaria, the biblical heartland of Israel, the West Bank. This happened after the occupation of Jordan in 1948 until 1967. They renamed the area of Judea and Samaria the West Bank, and the world today calls Judea and Samaria the West Bank. But of course, people who read their Bible know that's not true, that Judea and Samaria has been the land and the heartland of Israel for thousands of years, and that the Jewish people have always been in the land of Israel since the time of Joshua. And so there's always been a people in this place of Judea and Samaria, and today these people are being demonized. 500,000 people Jewish people live in Judea and Samaria, and they are not only being demonized by anti-Israel forces, but even some of our friends. The Biden administration is trying to sanction some of the people living in Judea and Samaria, the Jewish people, but not any of the Palestinian or Muslim people who are attacking these people and doing terrorist attacks on a daily basis, including today. So we have to be very clear when we use language and when we speak about what's happening in the Middle East. We saw during the Trump administration that clarity brings peace. When U.S. decided to move its embassy to Jerusalem and declare Jerusalem as the undivided capital of Israel, everyone thought that would lead to war because it wasn't politically correct, but it was biblically correct. And because of that, we had incredible peace that led to the Abraham Accords, peace with our neighbors. And so once we make this decision to talk about the truth, to talk about what's really happening in the Middle East, then peace can follow. And so we've crafted this resolution together with Israel 365 and the Israel Allies Foundation, and we're excited to have it endorsed by the NRB today, and I'm going to read it out loud. It's called Biblical Heartland Resolution. Whereas the Bible refers to the area located west of the Jordan River as Judea and Samaria, or in Hebrew, Yudah v'Shomron, with both names tied to the ancient biblical kingdom of Judah and the kingdom of Samaria. Whereas Judea and Samaria has been renamed the West Bank by Jordan following the Jordanian capture of the region in the 1948 War of Independence and its subsequent occupation until 1967. Whereas the West Bank is merely a geographical term applicable to the country of Jordan and has no historic or legal bearing. Whereas the West Bank is located on the eastern side of Israel. Whereas Judea and Samaria are the biblical heartland of Israel, which includes sites such as Hebron, Bethel, Shiloh, and Shem, along with many other places with rich biblical heritage. Whereas the scripture foretells both the exile and the return of the Jewish people to Judea and Samaria in Jeremiah 31, whereas the New Testament speaks of the region of Judea and tells of Jesus being born in Bethlehem in Judah, Matthew 2, and references the prophet Micah, but you, Bethlehem, in the land of Judah, are by no means least among the rulers of Judah, for out of you will come a ruler who will shepherd my people, Israel, Micah 5, 2, and 4. Whereas Jesus passed through Samaria when he returned from Jerusalem to the Galilee, and the region of Samaria and his people are referenced in Jesus' talk with the Samaritan woman and at the well and the parable of the Good Samaritan. Whereas in Acts 1, Jesus commissioned his disciples, calling the biblical heartland by its historic and biblical name, saying, "And you will be my witness in Jerusalem and in all Judea and Samaria and to the end of the earth." Acts 1:8. Whereas Judea and Samaria is critical to Israel's security, as the Samaritan mountains overlook the Israeli coast, including Tel Aviv, and other major population centers, including Israel's international airport. Whereas Judea and Samaria provides strategic depth without which Israel is only 9 miles wide in some area. Whereas the presence of the Jewish people in Judea and Samaria in modern times is a blessing to the Palestinians living there, as Israeli investment in jobs provides economic opportunity for their Palestinian neighbors. Whereas the Jewish and Palestinian inhabitants of Judea and Samaria, who work side by side, are living out peace every day and choosing to be peacemakers. Whereas throughout history, enemies of the Jewish people have attempted to erase the Jewish connection to the land by renaming it, whether it be the Romans' attempt to sever Jewish ties to the entire land of Israel by renaming it Philistia, or its Jordan renaming Judea and Samaria the West Bank, or modern governments calling it the occupied Palestinian territories. The truth to the region's identity lies in biblical roots. Whereas referring to Judea and Samaria as the West Bank is an attempt to replace the region's Jewish identity, and whereas the government of the state of Israel refers to the region as Judea and Samaria, therefore be it resolved that the NRB opposes the use of erroneous terms West Bank to describe the biblical heartland of Israel and calls on its members to refer to the region by its historic name of Judea and Samaria. Thank you.
I'd now like to call upon the president of the NRB, Troy Miller. Troy, 70% of all the biblical places in stories in the Bible are in Judea and Samaria. And furthermore, West Bank, it sends the message that there's some little strip, it's like the bank of the Jordan River, but we know it's a much wider swath of land. And I want to commend you for the NRB taking the lead in changing the narrative. If all of the constituents of the NRB could start using the proper terminology, calling this land what it is, Judea and Samaria, reinforcing the Jewish heritage of that land, we will be standing on God's truth. So thank you so much, Troy Miller, president of the NRB.
Well, thank you, and thank you for having me here today. You know, Christians know and read our Bible. We open up our maps in the back, and we look at the land that was given to Israel and that God promised to Israel and gave to Israel, and we realize that Judea and Samaria are part of that land. And I think you're right. Words matter today, and the truth matters as well. And it is time for us to step up and be honest about the truth of what's happening in Israel and the definition of this land. And so we are privileged and we are honored to stand beside you and to endorse this resolution. And I think Christians across the country will look at this resolution and endorse it as well.
Thank you so much. I'm now going to call upon Tal Heinrich, who is a spokesperson for the Prime Minister's Office of the Prime Minister of the State of Israel, Benjamin Netanyahu. Tal, right now, so many of the world leaders are pressuring Israel to do things that would undermine our national security, such as this unilateral move to create a Palestinian state. Share with us the Prime Minister's opinion, the Prime Minister's point of view, and the unanimous opinion of the Israeli government on these matters.
First, it's my pleasure to be here, and thank you so much for demonstrating moral clarity, for showing us support. It's been an incredible experience to walk down these halls here at the NRB, and really, it's heartwarming. And you see, yes, it's true. There's pressure out there. There's also a lot of support. But it's important to mention that we are not fighting this war for support, although it's a great thing to have on your side when you're fighting a most justified war, nor the lack of support is something that will stop us. We're fighting because we faced, and we're still facing an existential genocidal threat called Hamas. And we've been in this tough neighborhood for more than 3,000 years. You guys here know the connection. You keep reminding the world of it, and it's important. And we know what it takes to survive in such a neighborhood. And right now we say that Hamas must be gone. We've said it many times that we oppose any kind of one-sided recognition of a Palestinian state because this is counterproductive. It will not bring peace. It will do exactly the opposite. It will be an enormous prize for the perpetrators of the October 7th massacre and the atrocities. And we know that appeasing terrorists never panned out well throughout history. That's a fact. That's a fact. And the Prime Minister has repeatedly said that any kind of settlement between Israel and its Palestinian neighbors is something that should be negotiated in direct negotiations without any preconditions. We've said it before, October 7th, we said it now. And anyone out there who truly cares about peace, cares about security of Israel, and cares about Palestinian civilians would have called for the surrender of Hamas, would have said, lay down your arms now, surrender, and bring the hostages back home. The fact that it's so easy for us here to say it, yet seems to be difficult. It's institutions like the United Nations, for example, that is outrageous. That is what every leader of a nation in the free world, civilized world, should have been calling for.
I would add to what you're saying that the United States is a signatory to the Oslo Accords. And according to the Oslo Accords, written in the Oslo Accords, any settlement must be bilaterally negotiated. And therefore, these calls by the current U.S. administration for unilateral recognition of a Palestinian state are actually a material breach of the Oslo Accords by the U.S. government if they were to go forward.
Josh, we have maybe a little bit of a historic moment inside the room where there was a resolution that will be signed and passed by the NRB. How important is that all of religious broadcasters start to really think better about how we call things in Israel, that the terms are misleading, derogatory, or even hurtful to Israel, like the term the West Bank?
Well, what we just did was unveil our resolution to call on Christian broadcasters to use the words Judea and Samaria instead of the West Bank. Look, language matters. And what we're seeing around the world is that people are confused because they've intentionally changed the language to mean something else. But people who read the Bible, both Jews and Christians, know where Judea and Samaria is. They know where Beth El is. They know where Shiloh is. They know where Shem is. They know where Hebron is. It's in Judea and Samaria. The Jewish people are called Jews because we're from Judea. So to erase our heritage, to erase our historical past by calling that place the West Bank is an affront to Jews everywhere. But also, it's inaccurate. It's historically inaccurate. It was only named the West Bank between 1948 and 1967 during the Jordanian occupation after the War of Independence of Judea and Samaria. And so people of faith need to understand what we're fighting for, and what we're fighting for is the truth. We need a massive education campaign and people to understand that when you say West Bank, you are saying that the Bible is wrong. It's not Judea and Samaria. It's actually a new place called the West Bank. And so it's very important that the NRB endorse this resolution calling on Christian broadcasters to say Judea and Samaria instead of West Bank.
And it seems to me like most Christians do believe it as Judea and Samaria. It's just a name. It's just what we've been calling it without even realizing the damage maybe that using that word is. So how much of this is just ignorance?
Well, I think there's two parts to it. First of all, I don't think that a lot of people understand that Judea and Samaria and the West Bank are the same place. I think that in a lot of Christian homes, they think, okay, there's Judea and Samaria, and then there's the West Bank of the Jordan River. They don't realize that that's the same land. And secondly, people who do understand it, they have to understand that words matter. When you change the language on something, you're giving ownership of that land to Jordan. It's the West Bank of Jordan. And it's not Jordanian, it's not Palestinian, it's Jewish homeland. It's the heartland of Israel, and it's Judea and Samaria.
Thanks, Josh. Appreciate it. Appreciate that you're doing all of these things for your country, but how we can, as Christians, come alongside you.
Always good to be together. Thank you.
God bless you. Tal Heinrich with Prime Minister Netanyahu's office. We are very impressed with the resolution that the NRB is looking at passing, just helping people, evangelicals, to understand the terminology in Israel is important, especially in our climate that we live today. So what are your reflections toward what the resolution that we just talked about?
You know, it's interesting. I'm Israeli. English is my second language, being born and raised in Israel. And for us, it's a given. It's Yehuda v'Shomron. It's not even an issue. If you open Israeli news TV, you watch the news, if there's a report about that area of land, it's Yehuda v'Shomron. So I don't want to say it's funny that we even have to discuss this issue, but yes, when I speak to the international media, it's true. Sometimes you do have to use the term the West Bank if you want to explain to an audience that has no clue about, because they've gotten used to it over the years. But yes, terminology matters. It creates reality.
And a resolution like this, or an organization like the NRB that is very much outwardly supporting Israel, how important is that to Israel?
The support that I've personally experienced being here has been incredible. It's an in-the-know audience that remembers what got us to where we are today, historically, and in more recently, as of October 7th, I don't have to remind people here why Israel is fighting a war that it didn't want and didn't start. I don't have to talk about moral clarity with people here, because I don't want to say it's part of their faith. It's part of their being. It's in them, which is incredible. And we're so appreciative of this. We know that we stand for the exact same values all over the American people, and this relationship that we have is so unique because we share the same values, and we know what the United States would have done facing a similar situation. The good people of this country, people of good conscience, understand what Israel is dealing with, an unprecedented scale of barbarism and brutality, an unprecedented challenge that we are fighting with an unprecedented effort.
Well, thank you. Thank you for all that you do. This is Troy Miller, who is the president of the National Religious Broadcasters. And we're at the convention, and you all made a bold move. And do you feel like this is bold? Do you feel like, of course you feel like it's right to pass these resolutions for Israel, but how unusual is it in America to have an organization that is very pro-Israel?
Well, amongst the church, I don't think it's that unusual. I think across America as a whole, unfortunately, a lot of organizations that I think Israel felt were supporting Israel or should support Israel really failed it after the October 7th and its latest Hamas attacks. But amongst the church, I think there's widespread support for Israel. We understand the biblical mandates that God gave to Joshua when he crossed over from the River Jordan there into the land that God said, this is your land. I promised this to Abraham. And so Christians understand that, and we understand the rich heritage of Christ in the land that he walked in. So I think we have a widespread support amongst Christians, but we have a big educational issue. We've been behind the 8 ball on the wording and the terms that have gone on, especially since God has reestablished the Jewish people in the land of Israel since 1948.
And these are hot button topics. I mean, these are topics that we're talking about in a big way nationally. So getting an organization like NRB behind a term like, not calling it the West Bank, where most people don't even realize the issue, the problem with calling it that, but this is like an educational type of an issue as well.
Yeah, exactly. I don't think it was a big step for us to do this kind of endorsement because, again, all Christians open up your Bible. We understand that Jesus walked through Judea. He went in through Samaria. These were the areas in the land that he preached at, and they were lands inside the biblical boundaries that God established for the land, the country of Israel. So again, we're talking about terminology and truth, and so much, that's what we fight so much in the culture today is terminology and truth, and that's what this is a fight about. And I really do believe in my heart of hearts that if we can educate people and they can understand what's going on there, that is the catalyst that will move forward for peace in Israel and the land of Israel.
Thank you, Troy. I appreciate it. God
Thank
bless
you.
you. Hey, I hope you enjoyed our program on YouTube. We want to continue to provide you some great videos on God, the Bible, and how it all connects with our world. It would really help us if you would consider subscribing to the InGrace YouTube channel. We would also like to have you comment. We will try to read and respond to them. And we also need you to hit the notification button and like the InGrace episode that you just saw. These ways will help more people hear about InGrace and more people hear the gospel of grace.